Welcome to part 2 of this mini-series on the crafting and gathering systems in Pantheon Rise the Fallen. If you haven't already watched part 1, go do that now and then come back here, because that has a lot of important info about the overarching philosophies behind the crafting and gathering systems and details of how to acquire ingredients. But now once we've gathered some ingredients, let's go to the crafting system to start making items. There are 6 crafting professions in Pantheon. Blacksmith, which of course works with metal and primarily makes weapons and armor. Outfitter, which makes clothing and accessories from textiles like cloth, leather, etc. Woodworker, as you can imagine, works with wood, which includes shields, staffs, bows, wands, totems, etc. Jewel crafters make fine accessories from precious metals and gems, like rings, bracelets, necklaces, etc. Next we have the provisioner, which primarily makes things like food and drink. And I want to pause on this one briefly because at first, making food and drink seems a little disappointing and maybe not very important. In many MMOs, food and drink aren't very meaningful. They might give you a minor boost to your health and mana regen or something, but usually not something you'd want to dedicate a whole profession to. However, in Pantheon, there are many situations where having good food and drink could be crucial. For example...
but food and drink are going to play a very important part in our game with allowing players to handle or to set themselves up for situational effectiveness. For example, and this is just a very broad example, but let's say that you and your group are about to go into an area that has a cold climate. And that cold climate is bad enough that there's going to be some detriments to operating in that climate. Potentially, you might have some acclimation that you've already done. You might have some items that help you with that climate, but you might also be able to get a special food or special drink that helps mitigate the effects of that climate a little bit, makes it easier for you and your party to do what you've gone there to do. That's just one example. There's a ton of other things that food and drink can do. But when we think about those sort of, that preparation for the encounters that you'll face and the places that you'll go, food and drink play a big part in that.
Lastly, the alchemist makes potions and elixirs, which are similar to food and drink, except that where food and drink are usually consumed in preparation of something, potions and elixirs are usually consumed in response to something, like in the middle of battle. Blacksmith, outfitter, woodworker, and jewel crafter are what's considered non-consumable professions. They make long-lasting items that you can equip, whereas provisioner and alchemist are considered consumable professions because they make one-time use items that you carry in your backpack. In Pantheon, you'll be able to choose one consumable profession and one non-consumable profession per character. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but before we continue, you need to know about schematics, which apply to all 4 of the non-consumable professions.
For non-consumable items, the recipe is actually going to be linked to an item that you find out in the world or you obtain in some way. You can think of that item as a pattern or a cast or a diagram or a frame or some sort of thing that helps you craft the item you ultimately want to create. And those will have limited uses. We call them schematics just as a group. Schematics will typically have limited uses, meaning that you'll use them up over time and you'll have to go get more. There are a couple of reasons for doing this. The first one is simply that it allows us to control the scarcity of crafted items. It also allows for a more social experience because those things can be traded, right? So just because you used up your dagger schematic doesn't mean that somebody else might not have a dagger schematic that they're willing to sell or trade to you, or that your guildmates can't go help you get another dagger schematic to use. So it helps with that, with bringing the crafter out into the world. It helps with the economic viability, and it helps with honestly making things just much more meaningful for the crafter to do. The other cool thing that this allows us to do, since we can now control scarcity, is it allows us to have many more types of crafted items than we otherwise would, and also to have those items be more powerful than they might otherwise be. because they're going to be rare and special when you create them. An individual crafter is probably not ever going to be able to create every single item that's available in the game. But the things that you do create will feel very meaningful and special to you.
There are tons of different schematics in the game, and tons of different ways that you can acquire them, other than just buying them from an NPC or another player.
In each major continent or region, you're going to find a set of basic schematics that are all essentially the same in terms of stats. And think of these as things that you start out with when you're brand new at crafting. So whether you start in Kingsreach or whether you start in Scarhold, there's going to be probably a set of those basic schematics, and the stats on those starting items are going to be pretty close to identical. But I do want to tailor the look and feel of those items to the area where they are created from, or the area where they come from. So a Kingsreach broadsword might have the same stats as a Rainfall scimitar, but the look is obviously going to be very different between those. And again, this is the basic level. This is the stuff that you would start out doing. As you progress, you're going to find that the different crafting schematics that you're working with come from a variety of places. There might be some that you learn from NPCs that you interact with in the world. There might be others that are related to the factions that we have in our world, because we have a very big world with a lot of different factions. There might be some that you get from adventuring or from perception or whatever, and those are all going to be built to be distinct and unique from each other. So let's say, for example, that you get the factional schematic for a Corsarian Valiance Aegis, which is a shield, or you can get the factional schematic for a Black Rose Escutcheon, which is also a shield. They're both shields. They're both probably be made by armorsmiths, but the look and the stats of both of those types of shields are going to be very different, because they're going to be distinct to the faction that they're associated with. Faction is actually going to be a very, very big deal in Pantheon for crafters. You're going to have to decide which factions do you want to pursue to learn their schematics, or to get their schematics and make their associated items. And you're not going to be able to do everybody, so you're going to have to make some choices along the way. But we think that's going to, again, make for a much more rich experience and much more diversity in terms of the items that people are creating in the game.
The fun thing about schematics is they give you more flexibility to pick and choose what types of materials you use to craft an item, as opposed to always following the same strict recipes. This gives you more control over the outcome, because the stats won't be randomized. Rather, they're determined by the pieces you use to put the item together.
If you're making a sword blade, that sword blade's going to say, hey, I need some metal. It's up to you what kind of metal you put into that sword blade, and there will be different choices that you have that determine the final stats of the sword blade that you make. As a crafter of equipment items, you will want to find all the different kinds of materials that you can use, and when you're crafting an item, you'll want to think about, what do I really want to get out of this item, and what are the right materials to use to get to that result. Little more involved than what people are used to, where things are just level tiers. So we aren't doing level tiering so much. Instead, it's really about managing those trade-offs and deciding which ones, what areas of focus are more important to you, and what are the right materials to use for that.
The two consumable professions work in a similar way, except instead of schematics, you use tools.
So consumable crafting doesn't use schematics. Instead, you have a tool. Like, simple example is as a provisioner, you have a frying pan. And your frying pan has enough room for you to hold, let's say, 3 or 4 ingredients in it. It's up to you what you put in there, and based on what you put in there, you're going to get different things out of it. So, if I throw a bunch of meat in there, I'm going to get a barbecue platter. If I put some meat in there with maybe some vegetables or something else, maybe I get like a stew or a stir fry or something out of it. So for consumable crafting, which is cooking and alchemy, it's going to be very freeform. And really what we want happening there is we want players to go out in the world and find new kinds of ingredients that they can use. To support that, we're also going to be allowing those two professions specifically to do crafting in more places out in the world. So you won't be as tied to towns and cities for your consumable crafting. Instead, you might even be able to do a little bit of it while you're out adventuring to help support your party.
Because there's an element of experimentation to crafting, you'll have a crafting journal that will keep track of what combinations you've tried and what the results were. But anyway, once you've got raw materials and schematics or tools, you can go ahead and make some items.
For crafting, there will be, I call it a challenge that players have to do. You can think of it, you could call it a mini game, but hopefully it's going to be a little more interesting than that. But there will be a challenge where, for example, if you're smelting metal bars, you'll have to manage the heat of the smelter to successfully smelt the metal. And if you pass that challenge, then you get your metal bars. If you fail, well, then you fail and you potentially lose some materials. So there will absolutely be something for crafting. The other thing I'll mention for crafting is that challenge will be different based on the type of crafting you're doing. So for smelting, you're managing the heat of the forge. For weaving, maybe you're managing the tension of the thread. You know, there will be differences as much as we are able. There will be differences between the crafting methods so that it will feel fresh and interesting when you pick up a different crafting profession or you try a different crafting profession.
As you're crafting items, you'll notice that they have diminishing returns on your progress in that profession, meaning that the more you make of a certain item, the less crafting experience you'll gain from each one. So you'll be rewarded for diversifying and crafting as many different types of items within your profession as you can. Making items isn't the only way to level up your profession though. There will also be content throughout the world that will provide an opportunity to use and advance your professions, like an NPC that needs you to craft something for them. As you level up your profession, various specializations will become available specific to that profession. For example, as a blacksmith, you might specialize in making weapons as opposed to armor. That doesn't mean you won't be able to make any armor, but you'll have more options for making weapons than someone who specialized in making armor, and vice versa. If you decide later you want to change your specialization, there will be a process to allow you to do that. But the developers currently can't promise that there will be a way to change professions completely, and if there is, it'll likely be very difficult. But ultimately, limiting a character to 2 professions and having them specialize within those professions helps create a sense of interdependency between crafters, since each profession will at times need materials made only by crafters of the other professions. This fosters a sense of community, which is fundamental to the feel that Pantheon is going for.
The best way to explain this, starting out, every crafter is going to have everything they need to make the basic items. So if you're a blacksmith, for example, you're going to be able to make a sword, and that's going to include being able to make the blade, being able to make the hilt, being able to make the pommel, and so on. You know, all the components that make up that sword, you as a blacksmith will be able to create a basic version of those components to use. However, if you are friends with, let's say, a jewel crafter, that jewel crafter might be able to make you a jeweled sword hilt, which is much nicer than the basic one that you can create. Where this becomes interesting is when you get into those intermediate items, those factional items that I talked about. You know, if you're going to go to all the trouble to make that factional weapon, that factional sword, are you going to use a basic sword hilt on it, or are you going to go ask your jewel crafter friend, hey, can you make me a jeweled sword hilt for this thing? So that's, you know, when we get into the sort of those intermediate items or those factional items or those rare schematics, that's where the interdependency will come into play. And it could be literally anything, you know, armor, weapons, any item that can be constructed. There's a chance for interdependency. Even when you're refining, if higher tier refining, you might need something that's maybe created by an alchemist as part of that refining process. You know, there will always be the option for most things for you to fall back on those basic components that you know how to make and create the item. It just won't be quite as nice as if you worked with other crafters to do it.
Yeah,
at the very, very, very top end of crafting, there may be some schematics that actually require that interdependency, but that'll be a pretty rare scenario for interdependency to be truly required.
When you craft an item, your name will be imprinted on that item's description forever, so everyone will know who made it. This further builds that sense of community, as you can establish a reputation as a reliable crafter and get repeat customers. Being a high-level crafter in Pantheon is akin to being a high-level adventurer in that getting there won't be easy, will probably take a long time and will be something that other players look up to. While most people probably view crafting progression as a sort of side gig when they're not out adventuring, I know there's at least a small subset of you who want to do nothing but craft.
How realistic will it be for players who really love crafting to spend more time crafting than adventuring?
Very realistic, as long as they are willing to work with other players to help get the things that they need. You know, if I could have somebody go hunt wolves for me for wolf pelts so that I can keep crafting armor, then I would much rather do that than have to go kill the wolves myself. Just saying.
The magical thing about an MMORPG is that it's a virtual world. These big tech companies might think they're on the cutting edge by creating a metaverse, but what they don't realize is that we nerds have been hanging out in virtual worlds for decades, and the best virtual worlds are the ones that allow you to inhabit them however you want. So in Terminus, whether you want to be an explorer who goes out to find all the different materials and schematics throughout the world, or you want to take on the role of a tradesman who stays in one city and just cranks out item after item and sells them, you can do that too. That's a great example of how even without grouping and adventuring, you can still be a part of the community at large by contributing to the economy, all of which makes this feel more like a living, breathing world. I thought about making a third part of this series to talk more about the economy, but at this point in the game's development, there's too much that's still undecided to make a definitive video about it. The economy is a hugely important topic, and Nefel has already given some of his thoughts on it, but it will require much larger scale testing with real players like in Alpha, so we'll revisit the economy around that time. And again, this is all just an introduction to crafting and gathering. There'll be a lot more to learn later down the line. If you don't want to be out of the loop about Pantheon's development as it approaches alpha, hit the subscribe button now because this channel is dedicated to following it closely. If you've been watching my videos for a while now, you'll know that I never ask you to donate to Pantheon's crowdfunded development. Everyone has different financial situations and levels of risk tolerance, so what you do with your money is completely up to you. However, if you do make the decision to pledge or upgrade your pledge, and my videos have in any way informed that decision, I'd appreciate it if you'd list me as a referral when you get your post-pledge survey. My account is BazgrimTV@gmail.com, and that helps me to know that I'm covering the things that you want to know about. So, until the next video, stay curious and adventure on.